Testing, testing. All right, praise Yahweh. Shabbat Shalom, man. Praise Yahweh. We'll go ahead and open up with prayer. Almighty Father Yahweh, this is a servant in your house, Kohan Kanan, asking to come before you with the great men in your house, Father, being seeds of the witness Yisrayl Hawkinson through our high priest and Savior Yeshua Messiah. Father, I do thank you for this Sabbath day that you have given us, Father, and I thank you for this week and the testing and the trials that we go through, Father, to help us to develop our character and to have the opportunity to practice the peaceful solution, your great laws, Father Yahweh, in our lives and our every interaction with our brothers and the people of the world, Father Yahweh. We know that your way is true and it's the only way to peace, and I do pray that you'll help us to continually examine ourselves so that we can develop this righteous character within us, Father, that we can you can develop this righteous character within us, and we will choose your way always, Father Yahweh, and put away the God worship that is in this world, Father Yahweh, that is bringing this world down to the point, Father Yahweh, where almost all hope of life will be gone. But we know that you will save your people, your creation, Father Yahweh. And I do thank you for our pastor and overseer who gave us these great words of wisdom, Father Yahweh, and who is showing us this light in these last days. And I pray that you'll watch over and protect him and keep him in your way, Father. And I do look forward to serving under him throughout all eternity, Father Yahweh, with this great family. And I ask and pray these things of you through your Son, our high priest and Savior, Yeshua Messiah. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. Oh, I tell you what, I am so thankful for the Sabbath day. Praise Yahweh. It's something that we can look forward to every single day of the week forever. No matter how trying or frustrating your week is, you can definitely look forward to the rest of the Sabbath, resting your mind from the cares of this world and re-energizing yourself, because that's exactly what the Sabbath does for us. The Sabbaths, the feast days, their appointments with Yahweh, we become renewed, we become refreshed, we become energized, as you would. I think of it as if anybody, I know we got some AC, old school AC guys here, but anybody's ever studied any type of physics, there's something that's called the law of thermodynamics. Now, I know I'll be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but one of the laws of thermodynamics is that higher temperature flows to lower temperature, okay? And higher energy, flows to lower sources of energy. And it's an attempt to balance out. And I look at the Sabbath days and these feasts and so forth, when we have our appointment with Yahweh as an opportunity to receive this power that comes from Yahweh, because every step we make, or every imposition, remember, every choice in righteousness, every Sabbath, every feast day, every time you practice the law of Yahweh, remember how Pastor taught us, it's the superimposing of righteousness, one layer upon layer upon layer, until you make this connection with Yahweh. And so, every time we meet with Yahweh, it's Him pouring out, Spirit Holy, this knowledge of Yahweh, this greater power to the lesser one, so that we can be built up, we can build this character of Yahweh up within us so that we can become just like Him, and eventually we'll be able to pour out that same power and strength to other people. So this is something that, we should look forward to as, having your batteries being used and drained all week, heavy loads being placed upon you, but it's not more than you can bear. Keep this in mind. It's not more than you can bear. Yahweh knows exactly what your tolerances are, and He won't push you beyond, or allow you to be pushed, I should say, beyond what you can bear. But know that what we get here on the Sabbath days, what we get here on the feast days, are our opportunity to recharge and to learn how we did what we did that week in the proper way, or what we could do better next time so we won't fall into the same trap. So look at these days as a time of rejoicing, a great blessing to, what was the other word? Glorify. To glorify Yahweh, to rejoice in this great knowledge, this great wisdom of Yahweh with our brothers. As the scripture says in Psalms, behold how right it is and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. And that unity is the new unity that's found in the house of Yahweh, in the keeping of the laws of Yahweh, believing and being obedient to the one sent. But we're going to get into, continue in chapter 13 of the 11th book of Yisrayl. end of the age, and this is part 1, for anybody who may just be joining us, chapter 13. We're on page 135, and this is the sermon from 4:16-11, and it's entitled, Being Humble Like Yeshua. Humble yourself as the lowest slave, and you will be forgiven and have a place in Yahweh's kingdom. Humble yourself as the lowest slave, and you'll be forgiven and have a place in Yahweh's kingdom. And, you know, in looking at the work that Yeshua did, you know, we always see the push that he was making in teaching his disciples and teaching his apostles and the message that he was given. You know, he always pointed out prophecy, and he always obviously pointed out and stuck to the law, pointed people in the direction of the law. And in fact, when certain people were cleansed, he instructed them in the law of Yahweh, now go and present yourself to the priest and do what is the required, thing, the required offerings and so forth. Go do this. This is according to the law of Yahweh. But you always saw in the character of Yeshua that humility and that willingness to serve. You saw the compassion coming forth from him, and nothing that he ever did was in a way to build himself up. Nothing that he ever did was, he never did it to exploit others. Wow, man, I see a lot of people here right now. I could take advantage of this right now. We can do healings for just, 3 denarii, and put prices on it. Like you see in these guys that sell this snake oil and so forth at these carnivals. They see righteousness as a way of making gain, or they take advantage of people in their times of weakness and exploit that in order to fill their pockets. Well, no, Yeshua didn't have that characteristic. He expected nothing in return. In fact, he pointed all glory and honor to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh. And Yahweh in the same way, it's like, what can we add unto Yahweh by him doing something for us? Nothing. What can you give? What can you do for the King of the universe? What can you give the Creator of all things? What does Yahweh require of us? He requires obedience, right? He requires reverence. That's the only thing that Yahweh requires of us. He says this is the whole duty of men in Ecclesiastes, to reverence Yahweh. Now, some people might say, well, Yahweh says we got to pay our tithe. Is Yahweh getting rich off of paying our tithe? Is Yahweh sitting, on big fancy gold thrones? He might be sitting on a gold throne, but it wasn't because somebody was paying their tithe. I can guarantee you all that stuff was created before ever mankind was created to have a person to pay a tithe and a job to pay a tithe or a job to make money or anything. Yahweh doesn't need these things, and you're going to find out that we aren't going to need these things forever in order to function. Our joy and our work will be in doing the work of Yahweh. We're going to have such tremendous, great joy, brethren, and I believe the scripture when it says, it has not even entered into the minds of man, but, just the bits and pieces of what Yahweh is offering this house in these last days to be able to have the opportunity to sit as servants to the entire universe, problem solvers, peacemakers, true peacemakers. And I'm not talking about peacemakers that are made out of plastic and iron and that shoot out lead and copper and silver and things like that. Peacemakers who have the most powerful tool in the universe sitting right here in a skull. Something that our governmental leaders right now can't do. As Pastor brought out last week, pointing out the scriptures, and as we've heard all week on the radio, they are groping in the dark. They're groping like a blind man, trying to find answers, but they don't have answers because they have rejected the only source of knowledge and power in the universe, who Yeshua Messiah was guiding them to, setting the example as the lowest slave and showing, if you want to solve a problem, don't try to rule over your brother. In service to your brother, find a way to help them and bring about a peaceful solution. You want to change a heart and a mind? You can't do it through force. Mankind's tried this for 6,000 years, and it hasn't worked. Service to other people is what brings about changes. And the greatest service that we can offer right now is learning the laws of Yahweh, learning the peaceful solution, learning how to be like Yahweh and to solve problems like Yahweh does it, and teaching this character of Yahweh to other people through our every action. So Pastor says here, he's talking about at the very beginning of this sermon, he's showing how the different diseases and the antibiotics that are taking place in the world, and how the different foods and the defilement that's coming into the foods because of the antibiotics and man's sins, and the reason that they're putting all these antibiotics in the foods is because of the poisons that the foods are taking into their bodies because of sin and rejecting the laws of Yahweh. So now they're trying to bring about this shotgun effect and pump 50, 60 different antibiotics to treat all the many different things that might be in the salmon or the milk or the meat that goes onto the market so that we can eat. And as a result, other resources, other things within the food system or ecosystem are starting to suffer as a result of the runoff that comes from the waste and so forth, products that come from the animals, like what goes into the fields and washes off into the stream and then goes into the waters. Well, the fish, they suffer from those things as well. And he was talking about the wild salmon here and giving that example. And he says regarding, let me just back up here. He says, and of course this gets out of the water, and the wild this gets into the water. He's talking about the viruses and the antibiotics and leukemia and so forth. And he says the wild salmon are infected. I think that's where it's coming from. It would be my guess. If they do away with the farms, but they're not going to do away with the farms because there's too much money in it. This is another of that I brought out years ago, that now we're seeing, and the reason I show you this is because Yahweh says we're witnesses. Now, this is something we also need to keep in mind when we come before Yahweh on the Sabbath day, because when we see the news and the articles and the things that are presented, whether it's, the articles that the Gregorian brings and we watch, or it's the articles that, pastor or another of the priests might read, these things are for our sake in being able to witness what's taking place in this last days, in this generation, because Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and those who come after us, they're not going to be eyewitnesses of what's taking place right now. What Moshe saw and what he testified of, what the apostles saw, they testified of, what Samuel Samuel saw, he wrote down. So these were eyewitness accounts of these things that took place, and it's going to be the same for us in these last days. So we have to take note, like Pastor says. How many of us got the notebook? And you don't have to raise your hand, but just think. He said, get yourself a notebook and a pencil and start writing down these things that you're seeing, because there might be some of these things that we can use and put together of the different accountings and testimonies of others into books. This is how books are put together. But he says we're eyewitnesses of these things, and we're going to witness this world go down. Babylon, which means confusion, the confusion that they chose. They chose their own way. They chose their own way, and he wants his house to see this, so you'll never want to take part of this kind of activities again. You'll never want to take part of this kind of activities again. And one of the things as a righteous father does in striving to protect his family is he warns his family of the dangers of what certain choices will make. And that's what Yahweh's done. He's given us a great book here. You want experience? Well, we've got experience in 980-something pages called the Book of Yahweh, of people and the choices that they made and the results of those choices. Remember, there's nothing new under the sun. Okay? Righteousness is righteousness, sin is sin. The 613 laws sets the standard, or the bar, if you want, for the dividing line of what is righteous and what is evil. Okay? So he gives you this book here, and in this book is prophecies, and there's instructions, and there's the history of what people and their choices led to when they kept or they broke the laws of Yahweh, the set of instructions. So by those experiences, thousands and thousands of years of experiences, Yahweh would hope that we would look to that, learn by reading, and set our minds and hearts on not doing those things that people did in the past that yielded them consequences. I mean, that seems simple enough, right? But the carnal mind is not that convincing, is it? You know, sometimes it takes a little bit of a bump or 2 bumps or 3 bumps on the head in order for us to wake up and see, oh, okay, that's what Yahweh meant when he said, you know, we have to do this, or we need to keep the Sabbath, or we need to salt our food. Oh, that's what Yahweh meant when he says, you know, we need to pay our tithe. Oh, I thought I was going to receive a blessing by playing $100 in scratch-offs first, and then win all this money, and then I could pay all this tithe to Yahweh. I thought that's what that meant. No, you know, our blessings come through obedience. Our blessings come through righteousness. That's the only way true blessings can come to anyone. So Yahweh wants us to be able to not have to ever want to take part in the activities that this world is going through right now. And remember, even Yeshua, even though he never partook in those activities that the world was going through, he witnessed them, and he suffered as a result of confused minds that were filled with hatred, that were filled with sexual lust, you know, whose minds were clouded with drunkenness and carousing and so forth. They eat, they drink, they rise up to play. They wanted nothing to do with work, just play all day and play and play and play. That's all they wanted to do. And that playing brought on STDs, it brought on hatred, it brought adultery, you know, it brought coals in the lap of another man, it brought murder and so forth, which led to wars on a personal level and then on a national level. And this is where we are today with all of this confusion built up. And it's just increased over the last 1,000 years, picked up speed in the last 100 years. In fact, I took an article here because I'm trying to think here. Let's look over to page 136. Let's look at verse 7. He says, now this is the latest report. At least 42 disease clusters have occurred in 13 U.S. states since 1976. 1776, I think that's when the 13 colonies became 13 states, right? Is that the Declaration of Independence? That's right after the swinging 60s, 1976. So he says 1976, 42 of these latest reports, and he's talking about these clusters of STDs here. These, let me back up here, make sure I'm in the right spot. Airborne prion, okay, prions here. The latest report, at least 42 disease clusters have occurred, this is in the report, in the 13 states. That's right after the swinging 60s. Now, if you remember me talking about the swinging 60s and how sin picked up in that time period, televisions were invented and hit the markets in the early 40s. They were practically in every home by the early 50s, and then this is where sin was taught. Everything is fair in love and war is the way it was brought across. And of course, they pushed adultery, fornication, and theft, and they built up the soldier boys as if they were gods, and they came back without arms and legs, and then they cursed them for fighting these wars. All right, they cursed the same ones that they built up and prepared and sent to wars, you know, and stand up for America, be patriotic and so forth, and then they spit in the faces of these men who were sent over and were trained to do the things that they did. But, you know, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if that in the Vietnam War and a lot of those wars in the Korea and so forth was they had a lot of photojournalism taking place, and a lot of people got to see firsthand the atrocities of war and what was actually taking place, and they started to develop a hatred for our people, you know, who were trained and went over to war, and that hatred was shown to them when they got back. So instead of these great welcoming parades, there was parade, but there were people throwing things at them and spitting out. I have relatives who told me about these things actually taking place when they got back. But I got something off online here regarding the swinging 60s. That was before my time, not after my time. Before my time, there'd be a lot of oil of Olay if that was the case. But I shouldn't say that. Forgive me. But in the swinging 60s, one of the things that was taking place there is that whole make love not war thing and so forth. And one of the things that was there's so much information there, but it was what was known as the sexual revolution, or a time known as sexual liberation. Now, it was a social movement that challenged traditional codes. Traditional codes. Remember, in the 40s, TV started to come out. Now, with the televisions, they weren't just showing nature programs and bugs and things like that. No, they started showing things to entice lust. So these things challenged the codes of behavior related to sexuality. Now, remember, Pastor said at first, the preachers were standing up and they were fighting against it. But when they realized the pull coming from Hollywood was too strong, well, if you can't beat them, might as well join them. So now, now you got all the preachers, they're giving shows too, they're making tours and doing all kinds of goofy stuff. So it was behavior related to sexuality and interpersonal relationships throughout the Western world from the 60s to the 80s, Sexual liberation included increased acceptance of sex outside of traditional heterosexual monogamous relationships, or primarily marriage. They have in parentheses here. Contraception, the pill, public indecency, the normalization of premarital sex and alternate forms of sexuality, and the legalization of abortion all followed. Now, this is the time period in this what was called the swinging 60s. It was a development in the modern world which saw a significant loss of power. It saw a significant loss of power by the values of a morality rooted in the Christian tradition and the rise of permissive societies. This permissive societies here is, and let me finish reading. The rise of permissive societies, of attitudes that were accepting of greater sexual freedom and experimentation that spread all over the world and were captured in the concept of free love. Well, it came with a price, whether they realized it or not, and a lot of them are paying the price right now. The world is paying a price right now. What we're seeing take place in the schools, what we're seeing take place in the on the college campuses, what we see take place in the homes, the churches, the places where people go to worship. The mindsets of people, the mentality of people, the confusion has built up in the minds because of what came about, because of what people thought was free love. Well, there's nothing free. There's a consequence, there's a price, there's something that's going to come as a result of your actions. Now, this permissive society is a society where social norms are becoming increasingly liberal. This usually accompanies a change in what is considered deviant. While typically preserving the rule "do not harm others," a permissive society would have few other moral codes, that is, harm principle or no victimless crimes. Aspects often change as society becomes more permissive. Aspects also change as the society becomes more permissive. Here, if you have your scriptures, a few more minutes here. Look over to Amos 3. Amos 3, because these are coming about as the choices of mankind in the rejecting of Yahweh's laws. Right. Here we go. There we go. Okay, that's on page 696. Amos 3. And this is what Yahweh says. He says, Therefore, this is what Yahweh, Father Yahweh says, an adversary is surrounding the land, and she will bring your strength, or bring down your strength from you, and your palaces will be plundered. Now remember, they said that this whole thing has spread throughout the world, and of course, what occurred in the swinging 60s was a pickup in speed of the immorality of mankind because of how fast this sin was able to spread, quicker and quicker and quicker. But remember where Yahweh showed that this came from in Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 15. He says, "Therefore, this is what Yahweh of hosts says concerning the prophets. Behold, I will feed them with wormwood and make them drink the water of gall. For from the prophets of Jerusalem, for profaneness has gone out into all the land." Because of the prophets, because of their work, because of their religion, the rejecting of Yahweh's laws and teaching that, yeah, it's okay, free love. It's better to, have free love than to go out to war. But the end result of both of those things were death, is death. And they're dying, they will die. And Yahweh set this standard for mankind at the very beginning, but they rejected it. They rejected it with Moshe, they rejected it with Samuel, they rejected it with all the other prophets. Even when Yeshua was teaching, they were rejecting Yeshua, who was pointing out their sins. And Yochanan was telling Herod, it is not right for you to have your brother's wife. And they rejected Yochanan. The prophets, the foolishness of preaching, foolishness to the world, but these are words of life to us, but this is the strength of Yahweh, which Shaul said he is not ashamed of because it leads to life everlasting. But when you reject the laws of Yahweh, you reject that strength that can keep you alive, and then this power that surrounds the land, that is taught by the prophets of Jerusalem, will bring your strength down, and dying you will die. And you'll get to the point where children are your oppressors, as the prophet says. They're your oppressors. And you grope at the dark trying to find a solution. Why do we have these things taking place? How can we stop it? It's too late. What you have developed started decades before. Of course, now Yahweh can step in, and that's what the peaceful solution is designed to do, to teach, to fix problems. We can fix these problems through education, but now we've got to start a new genetic base, so to speak, to start to build up from there, because it takes us, 4 generations, 3 to 4 generations, these sins build up. So we have to stop the sin to keep those generations from continuing to build. And then we can start to totally eliminate it from the genes of our children, and we will have these children who will be, as Yeshua, the humble, like the lowest slave. The humble character that he displayed. Let's look at verse 15. He says, what's going to make you love Yahweh. What's going to make you love Yahweh is witnessing what the other way brings in the fight that he has gone through to bring you a way that won't cause harm. You're going to love Yahweh. It may be too late for you to enter his kingdom if you don't repent now, but you're going to love him. Again, the experience is not the best teacher in this situation. The best teacher for you is a believing without seeing, or I guess just say the best teacher for you is the one sent, but believing in everything that the one sent without having to see and experience these things for yourself. All right? Yahweh doesn't want you to go out there and partake of fornication and adultery to say, okay, yeah, now I understand what that means. Yeah, I won't do that anymore. And many of us, we were drawn out of that world. We were drawn out of the midst of the beast and partaking of those things. And that, we have that record in our mind. And that's a part of what Yahweh allowed us to go through before he called us out. As he says, he has gone through to bring you away that won't cause harm. You're going to see these things. You're going to witness these things, whether you see them with your eyes or whether you have at some point in your life, before Yahweh called you out, experienced it. And you're going to be able to compare the two, and we should be developing a deep, sincere, eternal bond of love with our Heavenly Father and the laws that he gives us, because in those laws, we see the character and the sincerity that Yahweh has for his creation and wanting harm to come to no one. And that's the point that we need to get to, and that's going to make us truly profitable servants. But he says over here on 137, he says in verse 24, and we're witnessing it devour the earth. You've been protected, I know, that Yahweh has protected you. Some people bring this into the house, these sins, and everyone has it, but some people bring it pretty heavily, born diseases with them, to the house of Yahweh, and many of them are healed, many more leave and die. And Yahweh knows what every one of us is going through, but the point is, in submitting to Yahweh through following the instructions, asking at Abel, and doing the cleanses and so forth, Yahweh is able to cleanse us and take sickness away from the midst of us. But obedience is what he's most concerned with in developing that righteous, humble character like Yeshua Messiah. And I know the second part is going to get more into that because this was right before the Passover. But keep in mind, brothers, what Yahweh's called us here for, and the hope and the purpose and the goal that Yahweh has for his creation. It's not for us to suffer, but it's for us to be bringers of life just the way he is, to enjoy life to its fullest and to have it throughout all eternity. So if you all please stand, we'll go ahead and stop there. I turn it over to the great Khan, Stefano and Caucus.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. We're going to continue on the 11th book of Israel, He Who Rules as Yahweh, the end of the ages. We're going to continue. We're going to start on page 140. And we'll start with verse 43. And it says, well, it started with, and this is the important thing, meeting with Yahweh. Well, Yahweh meets with his people at his house, at his prophesied house. He doesn't meet with them anywhere else. He just meets with them at his prophesied house, and he trains them and gets them ready to go deliver this to those two countries or wherever. And he was talking about the two countries we still had to reach back then. 44, and he says, Exodus 20, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy, that doesn't tell you all of it. In fact, we're told by the prophets several different things. You're to find joy there, find your joy. And this is, this part about remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy, that doesn't tell you all of it. It's like all of Scripture, in a sense, is, and I look at these commandments and laws almost as titles to books of Israel, or these are just like the beginnings of his teachings, because there's so much to remembering the Sabbath day to keep it holy that comes from him explaining the Scripture that it's really just a heading to his teachings. There's so much more that goes to this, and this is what he's saying. That isn't all of it. In fact, we're told by the prophets several different things. You're to find your joy there, find your joy, and this is really. You could call this a subtitle to this lesson that he's giving us, because he's going into these details about finding your joy there and what it means to find your joy there. Now let's go to verse 55. Verse 55, Yahweh says, Pastor says, Yahweh's eyes in his heart are here right now. They're the biggest thing in his heart, in Yahweh's heart right now. And remember, Yahweh's heart is his plan. Remember, Yahweh, Pastor explained this to us recently, that it is Yahweh's pleasure that none should perish, and he explained how that pleasure meant his plan, and pleasure is desire, and desire is your heart, and that's how all these things kind of tie together into one concept that has different aspects to it. And so, but Yahweh's heart, Yahweh's plan, we're the biggest thing in Yahweh's plan right now. And this is also the same thing as his heart. Now I want to read a story here about a homicide that occurred in Abelin. We played the story on the news last Sabbath. And it was the third homicide in Abelin in December of this year, which was quite an incredible thing when you think about it, for a city of 120,000 or so to have 3 homicides in 1 month. And this incident began on Christmas Day, and then it escalated, and then just after midnight, around 2 in the morning, it ended with a homicide. And I want to read you the story, not so much because of the story itself, but because of a woman, an expert in the story, her comment. But it starts out, Abelin woman shot and killed her estranged ex-boyfriend Wednesday after police said he broke into her home and assaulted her. According to police, 34-year-old Ernest Gonzalez tried to break into a 35-year-old Luanda Taylor's home on Minda Street Christmas night, but fled the scene when he found out. Taylor called 911. Just after 2 a.m. Wednesday, police said he succeeded in breaking in and assaulted her. Taylor's 16-year-old son and newborn child were present at the time. So she got out her gun, which she legally owned, and she shot Gonzalez once in his left side, according to police. Gonzalez fled the home, and the police said they found him in the front yard. He was transported to Hendrick Medical Center, where he died. Now, then they brought this expert woman on. They showed the story. They gave the regular witnesses to talk about the story and the police. And then they had this counselor. And the counselor with the Noah Project and the Regional Victim Crisis Center were called to the scene. And she said, this is a horrible situation, but this is an example of how the police department has really enhanced over the past couple of years. And she said, Dodson said, it's crucial for victims of violent crime to get the help they need. You never know how you're going to react until you're in that situation. So our advocates are trained to work with however the victim is feeling at the time. I've had victims tell me they never get over it, but they do get past it, and that's what we do, is help them get past it with their normal lives. Now, I heard this story, and I heard the story and how the police were called. They didn't come there because he had ran away, and then he came back, and the woman killed this guy, and then this expert comes on, and she says, this shows how the police department has enhanced. And I've been thinking about this all week. I was like, what does she mean? This shows how the police department has enhanced. Because I don't see how you can get that out of here. Not necessarily that the police did anything wrong, but I don't see how you can take the view that the police department was better because this guy was shot and then they showed up afterward. But this is the different way of seeing things that this person have. It's a perspective that this woman has. In her eyes, things are better because after the shooting, the police called her, to go counsel this woman. And so that was the big improvement on the part of the police. But you have a murder here, and to me, at least a homicide, even if it's justifiable by their laws, you still look at the situation as overall a bad situation. You wouldn't conclude right away that this was an improvement, but she saw it that way. And that's the way, that was her perspective. And it's like this story we just had with the shooting on CBS News, and it showed the school shooting where something like 27 people were killed just after a few months ago in Denver, Colorado, where something like 12 people were murdered in a movie theater. And at the very end of the story, they had the psychiatrist or the psychologist come on, and he says, make sure you tell your children that they're saved. He said that they're safe. He said, make sure you tell their children that they're safe. And I was thinking, well, this is another person who's got a totally different perspective than I have, because I don't know how he can see that is going to help anything, or how we can even see that the children are safe, because they're not safe. And in fact, this is the way that the House of Yahweh is portraying the prophecies. In reality, is that not only are the children not safe right now, they're in more danger than anyone ever on planet Earth has ever been in. You are as unsafe out in the world as you can possibly be. It doesn't get any unsafer than this. You could be vaporized tomorrow. If you go into a movie theater, it's very likely you're going to get killed, or something bad is going to occur to you that won't make the news. Maybe you'll just get punched. Maybe you'll just get robbed. Maybe you'll just catch some disease from the chair in the movie theater. You'll get something from the popcorn. But to say you're safe and to have that point of view shows a spirit, that is in these people. And this is what is meant when it's talking about Yahweh's eyes, along with other things, but it's his point of view. It's Yahweh's understanding of things, so that we don't see things the same way they do. And the scripture classifies this as blindness, or darkness. This is the way they see things, whereas Yahweh's eyes are light. In Yahweh's eyes, it's not like they're really not seeing anything. They're not totally blind. They just see things in the wrong way. And so he sees things as it's safe out there. It really is. We just had this 27 people killed, but that's just an anomaly. Okay, yeah, we did have 12 people killed in the theater, and then there was 4 people that were killed in the other place. Oh yeah, then there was 4 others, and then there was the 2 police. But other than these little exceptions here, it's really safe out there, and it's getting safer all the time. But he does believe this, and he believes by teaching this and by preaching this position, these eyes that he has, that he's going to somehow help society. He really does think this is the way, and this is what Yahweh is saying. Yahweh's eyes are here right now. They just recently, I'm going to get a little further into this section. Well, let's read this verse 55, the rest of it. This is the finishing work that will take over the universe, that will bring not only health, but it will bring joy and gladness and abundant living. We will stop war, as Isaiah 2 shows. Never again will there be war after Yahweh brings this thing about. And Pastor is talking all about the same thing here. This is a real unified, as all of them are, a real unified sermon, and this is what you need to do, is you need to break the sermons down, if you can, into sections, and then tie them together and see how the sections fit together, because he's not just going here, there, and randomly going all over the place. It all ties together to make a point. Never again will there be war after Yahweh brings this thing about, and yes, he is relentless. The Catholic Church says it calls him relentless judge, and I'm glad he's relentless, because that's the only way he can bring this about. But he's going to make you see. Okay, this is Pastor talking about this, understanding that he's going to make you have. He's going to make you witness this. Right down to the very end, if you'll humble yourself and be a part of this work, he'll let you witness this. And keep in mind that word witness. Right down to the very end, yes, and you're going to love Yahweh. Because, these people can witness the same events as we witness and not see the same things. So Pastor is talking about, we're going to witness this, we're going to see it in the right way. We're not just going to witness it, we're going to see it in the right way. And he's a big component in what it is we're going to see and how it is we're going to see it. I have every winter back east where I'm from in Boston, they'll have the first snowstorm of the year. And it snows every year there, and it's, several feet of snow, and you always have to shovel yourself out of the driveway, but it's like it's a big surprise to everyone. And everyone goes down to the store and buys a snow shovel, the ones that don't have it. And it's like, they run into the store, I need a snow shovel, and they run to the back of the store, and there's no snow shovels, because everyone bought them at the same time. So, but you're driving down the road, and you might see a sign, and it'll say outside, "We have snow shovels." Or on a summer day, you can have the same thing. In a real hot day, all of a sudden, no one has any air conditioners, and you'll see a sign, and it says, "We have air conditioners." Now, that's kind of like this verse 55, where Pastor says Yahweh's eyes and his heart are here right now. It's like, we have snow shovels now. You don't need to go in there and say, "I saw your sign outside, and you said you have snow shovels." And, "Yeah, we do have snow shovels." "Well, can I buy one? Are you selling them?" "Well, of course we're selling them. That's why we have the sign out there, so that you can buy the snow shovel, and you can go home and you can shovel your driveway." But this is what Yahweh is saying. He's saying, my eyes and my heart are here right now. It's like it's available here now for you to get. It's like an advertisement. It's not like, I've got my heart here so you can come take a look at it. I got my eyes here, you can come here and I can look at you. He has it here available for you, just like the guy who has a sign outside that says snow shovels. I have snow shovels. I have them for you. And this is what Yahweh has here for us. He has his eyes. He has his perspective, his way of seeing things, his understanding, and he has his heart. That is his desire, as the scripture in this lesson Pastor talks about. He uses the word humble. He has humility here for you. And the way he's going to give this to you is by you coming and keeping this Sabbath. And it's like, this is how you get a snow shovel. You go to the store and you buy the snow shovel. Well, you come here and you actually get Yahweh's eyes and you get his heart here at the Sabbath. This is where it is. This is where you get it. And this is something you see. I even was watching this because these eyes are things that it's like in a court. You'll have the witness, And say you have a typical, someone runs a red light, and you'll have a witness, and there'll be someone else that was standing on the sidewalk, and he'll testify, and he'll say, yeah, I saw him, and it was a red light, and he ran through it, and he hit that car and put a dent in the side of the car. And that'll be what's called a fact witness. Okay, that'll be someone who's going to testify to the facts of the case. But then you can have a case like, for example, where someone, like a heart surgeon, and he's doing a heart operation, and he does something wrong during the heart operation, and the patient dies. And the patient dies, and the family then hires a lawyer, and the lawyer says, we can sue this doctor for malpractice because he didn't do this right. He didn't use the right stent, or he should have used a scalpel instead of this other thing that he used. We've looked at the records, and we can find that he did not really use the right tools to do this job, and that's why your husband died, and we'd like to bring that before a jury. And so they could bring it before the jury, and the jury will be made up of, carpenters, and it could be made up of people that work in a car factory, and they don't know anything at all about heart surgery. Okay, they don't know anything about heart surgery. So you can present, but they're the ones who are going to make the decision here. Okay, so you got one side, and he's saying, well, he used this kind of a knife, and he used this number 2 stent, and he should have used a number 3 stent, and they're testifying to all this stuff, and the jury goes back in behind in jury deliberation, and they're like, I don't know whether we did this right or not. I have no idea what a stent is. So they have this concept, which is, it's the expert witness. Okay, and the expert witness comes in, and what their job really to do is to educate the jury real quick on this topic. Okay, basically, to kind of explain to them heart surgery in a day or two, or whatever it is they give them, so that the jurors can then go back and supposedly make the decision. His job isn't to say, he committed malpractice here, I'm an expert, and he committed malpractice, but they have to explain to the jurors how heart surgery is supposed to be done, so that they can then see that it wasn't done right and make their decision. And this is another capacity that we have, and that Israel Hawkins in particular has, is he explains these things that are taking place that are going to change the hearts and minds of the people, because if there isn't anyone here to explain what's causing it, they could have someone come on, and they could give that, like that example of that woman who killed her boyfriend, and come on and say, this was a great situation here. This shows how the police have enhanced in their ability to deal with these situations. See, there needs to be someone to explain the evidence, because these people don't understand what they're going to see. When the nuclear bombs drop, if there isn't someone here to tell them what's causing it, anyone can put anything into their minds. You could have the nuclear war start, and you could have Rumsfeld come on and say, the reason we had this nuclear war is we didn't have enough Trident missiles. That's the lesson of this war. We have 4/5 of the Earth's population have been wiped out, and they wouldn't have been if we have had twice as many Trident missiles, just like I told Congress we should have had. So they can go on endlessly, and just like the guy who says, what you need to do is you need to tell your children they're perfectly safe. And the audience, almost to a person sitting home watching CBS News, then went over and told their children, you're perfectly safe. There was hardly anyone, I bet, that caught that was a ridiculous thing to say, because they're so subject to the expert witness. They're so subject, and this is what we are. This is what Israel Hawkins is. There needs to be, and that's why you see this interweaving of the events of the world with Scripture, the events of the world with the cause and effect. And this is what an expert witness would do. He would take the testimony, and then he would explain it from an intellectual perspective, their word, from the studies that he's done, what that means, so that the jury can then make that decision. And that's what we're seeing in here. And this is what Yahweh's eyes are. Part of what Yahweh's eyes are is this perspective on things, so that we don't come away from the nuclear war thinking we just needed more ICBMs. And we don't come away from the shooting thinking, you know what, it's even safer than we thought now after that shooting. The first thing you want to say is, we're perfectly safe after a shooting. I think you do that after a couple of years of no shootings. Then you might want to say, I think we could probably tell them they're safe now. But no, because this is the madness that Pastor mentioned of the mind, the madness that the people get. Now, verse 69, and notice, in no way pass from the laws until all things are perfected. Well, of course, you're part of that perfection that Yahweh is training you for. He's training you to bring this perfection not only to earth, but to the universe as a servant, as a willing, obedient servant of His, which He can send out not only to earth, but to the planets, and they will readily accept you. You will have more honor than Solomon with these heavenly beings once you humble yourself and are chosen for this job. That's how important you are. That's how and why Yahweh's heart is with us now. Of course, and this is more expansive than what I'm saying, but I'm saying an aspect of this, Yahweh's heart is here now, is Yahweh's heart is here for you to take, for you to get for yourself. Just like the shovels, we have snow shovels. We're the biggest thing in His plan right now. See how Pastor said that? We're the biggest thing in His plan right now. Whereas in verse 55, he said, we're the biggest thing in His heart. See, the heart is the plan. Because Yahweh's pleasure is that none should perish. Yahweh's plan is that none should perish. Okay, it's all the same thing. Let's turn over to Yekitska 18:23 real quick. Yekitska 18:23. We're the biggest thing in His plan. We're the biggest thing in His heart. His plan, which is His desire that none should perish, is going to become our desire. Let me see. Yekitska 18:23. Do I have any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, says Father Yahweh? No, but rather that he would turn back from his wicked ways and live. And Pastor has told us this is the plan. Is it my plan that the wicked should die? But when the righteous turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity and does according to all the abominations that the wicked man does, should he live, all his righteousness that he's done will not be mentioned in his behalf. In his trespass that he has trespassed and in his sin that he has sinned, in them he will die. So what Yahweh is saying there is, one of the worst aspects of the plan right now, one of the greatest sufferings that is a part of the plan, which is allowed, is followays in a lot of ways, because they become such a curse in so many different ways, in the way they demonstrate themselves and in how they hurt others by pushing them away from Yahweh's house. And 3/4 fall away. And it's like that's unacceptable. And Yahweh is saying that. He is saying, yes, when the righteous man turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity, he's going to die. But in the same time, he's saying, is there any pleasure that any should die? Is it my plan that they should die? But what he's saying here is this ultimately, we're not going to have even these followaways. The plan is being worked out in such a way that what you're going to witness in terms of the facts that are going to be put before you in the world, along with the expert witness explaining those facts, and he's also a fact witness, but he's several positions in this, but he's an expert witness also, is going to bring it to the point where virtually everyone keeps Yahweh's laws. It's going to bring it to the point where virtually everyone keeps Yahweh's laws. Like Pastor said, there's going to be some that just flat won't, but it's not going to be 3/4 in the future. In the kingdom, it's not going to be 3/4, because those people will have been brought up righteously, which is a part of what we teach now, from birth and before birth. And this is going to cause it so that they don't get this mind that just can't accept the teachings of Yahweh, even when it's put right in front of them, even when they're called out. That's how important you are, and that's why Yahweh's heart is with us right now. We're the biggest thing in His plans right now. But He says, verse 84, if you break this law, if you don't become a servant, as Yeshua showed you on the Sabbath, making the Sabbath a delight, that's our job, each and every one of us, that's our job. Make the Sabbath a delight for others. And this is a big key to so many things. It's not just something to do by rote. It's a big key. You won't have time to think about yourself if you do this, but this is why it's emphasized so much. It's actually the meaning of the Sabbath, which then becomes the meaning of all this other stuff. because it's all piled on top of this. But you should have thought about yourself the first 6 days, right? You shouldn't have to be thinking about yourself on the Sabbath day. Verse 93 says, verse 47, therefore I say to you, her sins, though they were many, are forgiven. Where does that put you, Simon? Where does that put you, Queen of Sheba? I tell you, this will look pretty great when you see how much Yahweh loves you and shows you, and has gone to these extreme efforts to guide you into his kingdom and bring you to the loving servant that he himself is to you. Now they had I was on this point about the eyes. I wanted to make another point that was in the news. They had, we've been talking about these Jesuits and the positions that they have in the government, and they just got rid of Petraeus as CIA director, and they put this man in, Michael Morell. Now the spirit is how you see things. Okay, so it's the words of I speak to you, they are life everlasting, but it creates in a person an attitude, and that attitude is reflected in how they see things. You know, and I've run into this a lot with lawyers or with different people, and we're discussing an issue, and we're both seeing the exact same thing, but in a totally different way. And because of seeing that in this different way, we come to totally different conclusions about what should be done. And that's why it's so important that you do have Yahweh's eyes, that you do see things the same way Yahweh sees them. But the way the world sees things and the government is through one of the things is the CIA. And this is another man. Now this is the man who's going to replace Panetta on the CIA. He's replaced Petraeus, this man, Michael Morell, and he went to Georgetown University, which is that Jesuit college in Washington, D.C., the oldest Jesuit college in the United States. It was founded in 1789. And then they have a man who's going to be the Department of Defense. He's going to take over Panetta's position. Now remember, Panetta is a professor at Santa Clara. Santa Clara is another Jesuit college. So here we're going to replace a Jesuit with another Jesuit. And his name is Chuck Hagel. Now, I looked up Chuck Hagel, and he was an Episcopalian, so I was like, darn, it doesn't fit my thing here I wanted to show. But it turns out, no, he is also a professor at the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. So he's an Episcopalian in name only. He's actually a Jesuit. He also is going to Georgetown University. Now, this man is going to be the Department of Defense. So this man is, remember that plane that they dropped the nukes from, that Panetta was sitting in. This man's going to now have that seat when Panetta leaves. And then the other Jesuit is going to have the Central Intelligence Agency and now that Petraeus is gone. And they're saying he's temporary now, but he's going to have the position permanently. So you can imagine whenever they see the events of the world occurring, they'll see the same things that we're seeing. They'll see the exact same things, but they'll get a little more details because they got spies all over the place. They're going to report, and they're going to come back to the president with these eyes, and they're going to say, what we need to do is we need to put more missiles over here, and we need to put some more missiles over there, and we got tanks building up over there, so we need to put more missiles over here and maybe another radar station. Now imagine if instead of these people in charge of their eyes, in charge of that spy system, imagine if he had put one of us there, and so, because their job is, President Obama doesn't have time to look at all these details. He gets the analysts' reports, okay? So the analysts, get all this information, and they come together and they say, this is the most important part we really have to tell them. What we would be able to do is we'd be able to come in and say, as if they could make us, just for a day, make us director of the CIA, just to vary the religion a little. You've had enough Jesuits. Could you have a House of Yahweh member once in a while, just to be fair? Maybe a Jew or Protestant, someone. We got like 10 Jesuits in a row, just for a day. We could go in there. We could say, President, we're looking at all this stuff, and we're looking at the tanks over here and the bombs over there, and our analysis says what we've got to do is we've got to stop bombing these people because they hate our guts and they're going to try to kill us. We've got to just stop being violent toward these people and taking their stuff because they know we're doing it. We're not hiding it from them. They understand this, and they're going to want to try to. So why don't we just try to make peace with these people? Could you see that perspective. If we could just bring that perspective to government, or just change that. And this is what Yahweh's eyes and heart is, what's here. And this is what on verse 93, if you look at the end of it, which we just read, he says, I tell you, this will look pretty great when you see how much Yahweh loves you and shows you, and has gone to these extreme efforts to guide you into his kingdom and bring you to the loving servant that he himself is to you. Okay, see, his heart and his eyes bring you to being the same as him. His heart and his eyes are here for you to take and for you to have. And that's why Pastor says in the beginning of the sermon, in the middle of the sermon, he says in verse 44, you're to find joy there, find your joy. In other words, this heart and this mind these heart and this eyes are for you. Just like the shovel where it says we have shovels. It's for you to get. That's why Yahweh is making that announcement. So now at this time we'll say closing prayer. Father Yahweh, this is Kwanzaa Farni, along with the great Kawan Kananya Seeds of the Last Days Witness Israel Hawkins, for your son, our High Priest Yeshua Messiah, along with the great men of your class, giving you great thanks, Father, for this understanding, this protection, this vision that you are giving us to see these things the way they really are, reality, and not to be blinded by the false doctrine of the Christian churches and all of their institutions. We do pray, Father, to be a part of your work forever, to not lose sight of this value of this tremendous gift that you're giving to us, to accept it, and to give freely of it, and to put all of our heart, soul, and might into being a part of this work and being a part of this work forever. We do pray for the sick that they're healed. We pray for the great Kohen Yedidia that he's released soon, and that all those who are being held back by the beastly governmental system are free and free to keep your laws. In Yeshua Messiah's name, hallelujah, Yahweh, praise Yahweh.